what's up, everybody? This is Doop on the Volley, Philly Sports Network's Philadelphia Union podcast. And for the first time in a long time, we got a full crew back here talking some Union soccer on a week where there was a Union bye week. So, not too much to talk about here. We're gonna get into obviously the Union's game against RSL this coming weekend, where Philly come back home to Subaru Park for the first time in a while. But before that, let's get some intros. So we got Jimmy King. Jimmy, how's it going, buddy?
Good. Thanks for introing me in, Tim. It's like you guys have said, I haven't had as busy of a week as you guys have had, but it feels like it's dragging along here. But it's good to finally talk about Union soccer and a game at Subaru Park coming up in a few days. It feels like it's been forever, and watching those games this past weekend without Union in action was I felt like a weird I don't know, it felt like I was watching my like best friends out having fun without me or something. I felt like a weird sense of FOMO not being in on the action. So good to be back and good to be talking Union soccer with y'all.
Dude, I felt the exact same way with that, which is why I tried to create some crazy guide to watching a bye week of like, oh, these are all the results that you would want to have as a Union fan, and then like two of them happen. But we don't need to go into that. But we also have Eric here today. Eric, how's it going?
I'm excited to watch the team again. Like you guys were saying, like it felt weird to not have a game when everyone else, it felt like, did, especially when we were already a game behind because of the Seattle game getting called off. Like it feels like we've, even with Champions Cup and everything, it feels like we've played less than the other teams, even though we've probably played more. So yeah, it's exciting to have a home game too.
Yeah, it's an interesting fact. I actually haven't thought about that with like all the Champions Cup games and then other teams playing in MLS. It's like it's kind of balanced out now, so kind of back on level playing field. And of course, we have Paul here as well. Paul, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for asking. I'm pretty excited to have the Union back, and the weather's finally getting nice out. We're getting to this summer month, and all around Phillies baseball's in full swing. Life's doing pretty good.
Yeah, man. I was kind of worried at one point because I was looking at the forecast like a week ago, and I thought it was going to say that it was going to rain. But luckily, it looks like that's moving out of the forecast. So it should be a nice day for some Union soccer. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, and before we start even talking about the Union, we wanted to kind of change things up a little bit since it was the bye week. There wasn't any first team action to watch, but the second team was in action, Philadelphia Union 2. And they had a big rivalry match against New York Red Bulls 2 down at Subaru Park last Sunday. And both teams were undefeated coming into the game. And anyone who could either get a win or a PK shootout win would go top of the Eastern Conference. And that's what we saw happen with Philadelphia Union 2 getting a PK shootout win after a 1-1 draw against New York Red Bulls 2. So I just wanted to kind of open things up by talking about the second team because we haven't really talked about them much at all this year. Just looking at their schedule that they've already played, they've played 6 games. They have 3 wins and 3 draws, and I believe they've won 2 out of the 3 shootouts that they've been in so far, which puts them at the top of the Eastern Conference on 14 points, tied on points with Red Bulls, but that shootout win helps them with a better goal difference, which is the tiebreaker, at least for right now, for Philadelphia Union 2. So just to kind of throw it over to you guys, like how much have you watched Union 2 so far this season, and has any one thing really stood out to you? I'll throw this over to Paul to start.
I've watched a little bit. I was at one of their first games of the season. Haven't been able to get down to Subaru Park to see them since then, but I try to watch them when I'm able to because I just love watching the kids in the academy just ball out and see the potential future talents that this club has in hand. And we know we have a lot of them down there in Union 2 and the academy all around. But when in regards to one player that's really stood out to me, Eddie Davis, a 17-year-old striker, he seems to be on the score sheet just about every game. And especially for the Union in the future, obviously it could be a couple years till you see him on the first team, but for a team that's possibly losing Carranza this season, we don't know what's going to happen with Ura. Seeing young strikers coming through the academy is definitely something that I enjoy seeing.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that. I mean, he's the club's top scorer right now with 4 goals from those 6 games. So he definitely is one to watch for the future. Jimmy, I'll throw it over to you. Have you been able to go out to any games, or is there any one player that's standing out to you from Union 2 so far?
Yeah, I've made it out to I've only made it out to one game this year, but I've watched a majority of them. And the one thing I'll say about this Union 2 team that it correlates to the first team is they also are showing that same sense of resiliency or that the Union have. I think at least 3 or 4 of the games that Union 2 have played, they've given up the first goal, and it doesn't seem to matter much. They seem to just kind of keep playing. They know they're going to get their opportunities. They know they're going to put goals in the back of the net, and they go from there and keep building. And we saw that again on when was this game? I want to say Saturday instinctively, but I know they didn't play on Saturday. Sunday, was it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think the game on Sunday against Red Bull, again, they went down early. But right after that, and for almost the rest of the game, it was them looking for the goal and being on the front foot and creating lots of opportunities. So, I don't know if that's by design. I don't know if all the teams come together and say, look, we're going to instill this mental fortitude amongst our guys where you're never going to quit. You're going to play to the last whistle. But either way, we're seeing that amongst a number of teams throughout the Union system right now. And I think it has something to say about Philly teams in general. But it's to see, it's really good to see. And it just shows that I do think a number of these guys could make it to the first team someday. It seems like these systems are starting to every year it's getting closer and closer to them kind of intertwining and handing people off to the first team. And we're starting to see that over the last year and hopefully the next couple of years as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Eric, over to you. Is there any players or anything that kind of stood out to you so far from Union 2?
I mean, Westfield has been at left back. He's been great. I'm really excited to see his future. And kind of touching on Jimmy's point about the mentality, even if it's not an intentional thing that they're instilling, like if these kids are watching the first team making all these comebacks on Saturday, how could that not fire you up for Sunday?
Right.
Like it's kind of no surprise to see them emulating the first team there. But really, I mean, the whole team is it's so exciting to watch. And like Paul was saying, they really just ball out every time they're on the field. And like, whether it's the starting lineup or the people coming off the bench, they always seem to show something. So yeah, it's always a good time. Always a good time to watch them. And I wish I had seen more of them.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to go back real quick because I realized I didn't get to throw out, or I forgot to throw out some names of some people that I think have stood out. And on it to seem like I was just skipping over that or anything, because there are a number of people that I think deserve their flowers from this team right now. One, Sanders Nagabo has seems like he is really fitting into his defensive midfielder role for Union 2, which is great to see because until Flock comes back, we are a little short in that department. Not that I think that he would come up and play for us this year, but it is nice to see some players coming up the pipeline in that position. Let's see here. You guys talked about Westfield. Just to add on to that, obviously, just moved Matt Rial to Colorado Switchbacks, I believe, in the USL on loan. He will be back. Who knows for how long? And there could be a permanent deal for futures elsewhere to get him playing time, which could open up a left back position within the first team. Right now, it seems like Nate Harriel or other options within the team are that depth piece on the left side. But Frankie Westfield, I think he's 18 years old, it doesn't seem like he's too far off from getting his first opportunity, at least just on the bench with the first team. So that's a guy that I would seriously keep your eye on over the next couple of years. David Vasquez has been talked about quite a bit. I don't think he's not playing lights out right now, but he's showing a lot of maturity, and I think LeBlanc is starting to ask a little bit more of him and some different things from him, and so I think he's still kind of adjusting to trying to take that next step. And then Andrew Rick, he's looked really good in goal. I don't know how old he is or how young he is right now. But every game I've watched, he makes a couple really good saves. And he looks really confident and really strong. He is a little bit of a smaller guy, but he carries a lot of like dominance and kind of he's able to conduct things really well, it seems. So he's another guy that I've been really, really enjoying watching this year so far.
Yeah, I just checked while you were saying that he's 18 as well, Andrew Rick. So we got some 18-year-olds coming up the pipeline there. For me, it's been really interesting to see the center back pairing of Macania and Neil Pierre, at least for a few games where Pierre's been in. One, just to see Pierre in person, since I did go to the game this past weekend. I know he's only 16 years old, but he is like the tallest player on the pitch. And it's just like, he's an imposing dude, and he gets up for those headers, and he's going to win those challenges. And it was just really cool to see that in person. Evan just shared a comment here that Ngobo stood out for him too. Very, very good in the center of the pitch, especially on the defensive side for Ngobo there. Which is good to see, just because he's one of those first team players that is getting time with the second team right now, and like you said, Jimmy, he could play a pivotal role depending on what happens with Leon Flock and the depth that we have at the 6 as well for the first team.
Just looking over, sorry to cut you off, but just Sanders Ngabo, just looking over some quick stats on MLSNextPro.com. So to be fair, I don't know how like accurate these are. I would hope they're as accurate as they get. But it says he's played 447 minutes this year, and his pass completion accuracy is 89.8%, which is I think that's a pretty impressive stat for anybody on the team to have for any considerable amount of minutes. And when you add the defensive side in that, sounds pretty good to add to the midfield in a couple years if he keeps progressing pretty well.
Yeah, that's a crazy stat. Just when you think of how Union like to progress the ball, it's usually through that 6. They don't usually like to kind of spread it wide, at least at the start. So if he's kind of that quarterback on the field, that would be another good asset for either the second team or the first team. One player we haven't mentioned yet, which we should mention, is 14-year-old Kevin Sullivan. He did come off the bench for his second game against Red Bulls too. He didn't get into the game much. The Red Bull were kind of wary of him. He kind of drifted around the pitch a little bit. It looked like Sullivan kind of started out as a 10, but then moved to the right side and then was allowed to drift kind of wherever the ball was going late on, looking for a goal to get the win. But Red Bull knew what he was able to do. So every time he was on the ball, especially when Red Bull have players like Andres Reyes, who are still in the game, who's a full-on Red Bull player and captain at times. He didn't let Sullivan do much with the ball there, but that's also one to look for. We're still waiting to see if that record homegrown deal gets signed before he goes over to Man City when he becomes 18 in 4 years. So we'll see how that kind of progresses and how many more starts he can get with Union 2 as well. Union 2 have more games coming up. They play again this weekend away at Cincinnati 2, which will be a good game for them as well. If you have the opportunity, I'd say get out to a game down at Subaru Park when they're at home. It's a lot of fun, like we've been saying. And I know, Paul, you mentioned even what you can hear on the field just because there's less people and less atmosphere. You want to share a little bit about what you said there?
So me and my friend, whenever we hit the Up Union 2 games, we love to sit right behind the bench, because in reality, when you go to a first team match, you really don't have the opportunity to do that unless you want to spend the big bucks. And me and my friend do love Marlon LeBlanc. We think he's a phenomenal manager, and if anything were to ever happen to Jim Curtin, I think he's a top shout to replace Curtin at the first team. But like I was saying, LeBlanc, he tends to chat a lot, and last year we were at a match, and Hugo Legwenick was still on the team. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Yeah.
And he was making a few errors in the match, and he basically shouted, if I remember, something in the minds of, if you make one more mistake, you're going off at halftime. And Mr. LeBlanc was true to his words, and he took him off at halftime. But I just think it's interesting just to hear the aspects of the match that you really don't hear because you're so close to the pitch, and it's it's not as loud. There's not chanting. I mean, we do have the Bridge Brigade. Shout out to them. They're doing phenomenal so far, and then they're in this season. But it's just a whole different atmosphere, and I really do enjoy it.
Yeah, and I kind of experienced that too when I went to the game this week. This was the first time I've gone to a Union 2 game in years. And what I'll say of LeBlanc, because this was the first time I saw him on the touchline, he is what the Union want in a coach. He's really getting after those players, even though they're mostly teenagers on the pitch, which we haven't touched on. The starting 11 was all guys under the age of 21, which is just crazy to think about in its own right. He gets on them and he wants them to play the way that they've practiced all week. And when players make mistakes, he's not like, oh, this is some kid just making a mistake at this level. Like, this is a professional game. So he gets on them. And I think it's the good kind of motivation. It's not like he's just yelling at the players or yelling at these essentially kids on the field. But like, he's motivating them like, hey, like, no, don't make that pass. Like, don't play into the pressure. Look around you. You had time to pick your head up, like things like that. It was really cool to see that because we don't see that in first team games because the atmosphere is unless we get certain things picked up on hot mics when you're watching at home. That's always fun when you hear Jim Curtin drop an F-bomb or two. But to segue away from the second team here back to the first team, before we get into previewing Union versus RSL this weekend, I just want to get your guys' thoughts on something that I've been thinking about a little bit. I know you guys touched on it a little bit on the last podcast that I wasn't on, but you guys kind of brought up, it's probably too early to talk about this, but supporter shield conversation type of things. And I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it because Union right now, with the way that they're set up with the games that they have in hand, if they can win those games in late April, early May, could be top of the East and top of MLS. So I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Like, is it still too early to talk about this? And two, do you think that this team, the way that it's constructed, could actually push for supporter shield and not necessarily win it outright, but just push towards the end for supporter shield? And I'll throw this over to Eric to start.
They're going undefeated for the season. No.
Hey.
I do think it's still too early. I think the team is going to be focused on one game at a time, which has served them well so far. And I think they'll continue to do that, and I think we probably should too, and we should enjoy this run while it lasts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Come a month or two from now, if we're still up there battling for it, then I think we can start talking about it. But really, I don't know. Beyond the implications for hosting MLS Cup, I don't know how much I personally care about the Supporter Shield.
Right.
I think focus has got to be on winning the whole thing, winning MLS Cup. But like I said, winning the Supporter Shield guarantees you host it. So
yeah,
from that aspect, it would be great to do. I think, and we've touched on this a little bit, especially last week, but the fact that so many of the games we've had so far have been away is also a big benefit. Because the team is not going to want to lose this undefeated start to the season at home. That's for sure. So they'll be, I'd be shocked if they weren't playing their asses off this weekend. So I think that bodes well for a performance against a good RSL side and potentially going forward, keeping ourselves in that supporter shield fight for the time being, which, like I said, if we're still in that conversation in a month or two, then why not?
Yeah. Paul, I'll throw it over to you with the same question. Is it still too early to really be thinking about it? Or, what should we kind of take away? Like, can this team actually compete on this level?
My heart is telling me that it's not too early, but my mind is telling me yes. It's still late April, early May. If like Eric said, if we're continuing this run in late June, early July, and we're still up there, I'd reconsider my answer. But we still haven't even entered the dog days of MLS yet. We still got a lot of soccer to play, but the way this team is playing, it is exciting. But I would like to see a full 90-minute performance, just once,
Yeah.
or
All
more
right,
than
Jimmy,
once.
over to you. Oh yeah.
Is it too early to talk about the supporter shield yet? No, because we're already doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Fair.
the team, I think, but in all seriousness, I think it shows that the team has at least some of the qualities to get there, right? Getting points on the road, resiliency, winning games you probably shouldn't have, i.e., Portland. So this team does have qualities that show they have potential, a potential supporter shield run ahead of them. I think if you look at the next couple games for them, at home to RSL, at home to Seattle, on the road to DC, at home to Orlando, and at home to New York City. And then you could even say after that, away to New England, who's in awful form. Those all are winnable games in my book. Not only winnable, but like almost all of those should be wins. If you're looking at it from we're only playing one game a week, we're putting all our focus in MLS. These all are 3-point games for me. Even if you come away with a couple of those a tie or one of them being a loss, I think we're still in pretty good position when we come out of those next 5-6 games or something. If you look at the table right now, Miami is leading the supporter shield race on 18 points. Union are at 13, but Miami have 3 games in hand. I'm always a little bit back and forth on the game in hand thing. I tend to be a little bit more optimistic when I look at them. Some other people kind of look at them as like, you can't count those as positives. You know, you got to get caught up and see where you're at. But knowing what we have to do in order to get caught up, to me, is an advantage of having those games in hand. And when you look at their performances, 9 of the 13 points have come on the road. That's huge. I talked about it last podcast, but Jim told us a couple weeks ago they look for 10 wins at home a season. 30 points from wins at home seems to be the mark that they like to get in order to feel comfortable reaching playoffs. And that's obviously in addition to their ties at home and their wins on the road and whatever else. But to get 9 points on the road through the first 7 games feels really positive. So I do think it's a little too early to start talking about this team winning the supporter shield, but I don't think it's too early to start saying that this team has some of the qualities that a supporter shield team needs to have in order to make a run. And I agree with you, Eric. I don't think a supporter shield holds nearly as much weight as an MLS Cup. I think almost every fan in Union fan base would take an MLS Cup over a supporter shield. At the end of the day, there's players on this team whose days are numbered with this squad. Like they're gonna leave at some point or another, and I would love for them to leave adding a trophy to their belt and adding a piece of history to Union's lore. And so I will never shy away from any trophy. And again, it's not the same as winning it in Premier League, but I do think it shows that you've been one of, if not the most exceptional teams throughout an entire season. And I think that is a lot I think that is an incredible feat. I think an cup is better, but I would be very, very happy with a supporter shield.
And another thing that I'm realizing, thinking back on previous seasons, I feel like we tend to start pretty slow and kind of ramp up as things go. So having this, if we were to somehow continue that pattern, I don't know how you really ramp up from being the last undefeated team in the league, but if we start maybe putting together those 90-minute performances on a consistent basis, then why not?
Yeah. if you look at that 2021 season, which ended up being that like oracle all record breaking season, or 2022, I think it was. Yeah. We did start. It wasn't an awful start, but it wasn't. We weren't writing home and saying we're going to win the cup after the first couple weeks of the season, or even talking about winning a trophy after 7 weeks of the season. And probably around this time is when they really started to find their form and really start to get it going. And it came after a stretch of draws, I believe. For us to come out of the first 7 games where we are and be 12th in the Supporters Shield, which doesn't sound impressive, but when you look at only being 5 points behind and 3 games in hand over the leader, I think they have a lot to build on and kind of work towards in that race.
Yeah. And a comment that just came in here again from Evan: does winning Supporter Shield get you into Champions League, Champions Cup, or not guaranteed? It does still get you into Champions Cup. It's a direct way to get there from MLS. So there is that on the line as well. That would probably be, unless you win MLS Cup or Leagues Cup. Those are really the 3 ways that you can get in to Champions Cup for next season as well. So there's something on the line there. But I agree with you all that it's too early to talk about the Union winning it, but it is kind of, I think, the right time to talk about what this team can do just based on the start that they've had in the 7 games that they've played, and how they have those games in hand on everyone else in MLS. So I think that's why I wanted to bring it up, just because it's something
And
there. Yeah.
speaking of Champions Cup, that reminds me, Columbus and Monterrey are playing right now. They just kicked off a little bit ago. And it feels weird to root for Monterrey, but if they win the whole thing, that puts Union in the Club World Cup. So
it sure does.
Definitely something to keep an eye on.
It's a weird instance. I was looking at this Evan Cohen from Philly. Oh my gosh, there's so many different blogs. I always get them mixed up. But Evan Cohen writes for, I think, Philly Soccer Now.
Yes. Yep.
And he wrote a good article today breaking down kind of the ifs and whys and why Union would qualify. And basically, for fans that don't know, the Club World Cup is expanding next season, a bigger pool, and part of the qualifications comes down to tiebreaker. And if Monterrey were to win, another Mexican side would not be be eligible for that tiebreaker. And the tiebreaker would essentially come down to the most points secured in CONCACAF competitions over the last couple of years, plus a couple bonus points for advancing in competitions and stuff. And as it would be, Union are much higher than all the other MLS competitors on that list. And so they are next in line for that tiebreaker. And so, as Eric is saying, if Monterrey win, Union qualify for the Club World Cup, which feels weird to kind of root for them, because not everyone's like this, and I understand, but I'm kind of one of those like MLS guys when it gets down to like the end of CONCACAF. Like, I want to see an MLS team compete. It makes our league better. It brings more players to our league, so on and so forth. But right now, I got to root for Monterrey, and that feels really super weird. But it feels nice to know there's a couple other sickos there with me, rooting for the opposition, maybe.
Yeah, I think I'm usually with you with that, Jimmy, of rooting for MLS, but in this case, it's all Monterrey for me. I want to see Jim Curtin's Union get into Club World Cup and play against teams that they have no business playing against. But that would be crazy to see. Right now, in that game that you guys mentioned, Columbus and Monterrey, it's the 15th minute. It's 0-0. I believe this is the first leg, right?
First leg.
All right, so another 2-leg playoff for fans to keep an eye on there. Really quick, let's just go into some of these comments. We got a few just rolling, and we got little G Griffith who says, "I'm a big Union soccer fan, so welcome to the show. Thanks for sharing your fandom." And then we have Desert Fox who said he just started watching soccer a year ago, and that they have a friend who has season tickets, and that they think they should get rid of offsides to some degree. So that would be interesting. He kind of goes on to talk about how it would kind of be like hockey a little bit, especially scoring and things like that. So do you guys have any thoughts on that? What it would kind of look like, or what just thoughts in general?
Fox, I don't mean this as like a diss at all, but it's a very American viewpoint, and I mean, and like hockey went through the same thing. I'm a big hockey fan too, and hockey consistently has tried to figure out how do we get more entertainment into the game and what makes the game entertaining. And when it comes down to it, people really fucking like when people score goals. Don't like see a lot of defense or like the goalie making saves, and that's an American thing. Like if you go to Europe, it's not the same. Like, they like to see defensive performances and the goalkeeper standing on their head, and so I completely understand where Desert Fox is coming from. I understand why someone would want to see more scoring in the game. It makes complete sense to me. Unfortunately, soccer is down to tradition, and that's probably one thing we're never going to get away from in soccer. But I will say it's super annoying to see a goal and think your team has scored and won or whatever, and then for it to get pulled back for like an inch of offsides. It's like one of, if not the most frustrating things in all of life. So I completely get it, but it's probably here to say if I had to.
Especially with the lack of clarity. Speaking of those pulling it back, it's not unique to MLS. I mean, we saw a lot of the controversy in the FA Cup semifinal with Coventry being robbed. Sorry, Paul.
Don't worry, I agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought for sure, and it's. I also find it interesting. I feel like American audiences are a lot more likely to excuse low scoring in other sports and harp on it in soccer. You see them it's a low scoring baseball game. Oh, it's a great pitcher's duel. Or if you see it in like American football, it's like, oh man, like a great, like you see in the Steelers versus Ravens games in the past, like everyone's harping on the defense and how great they are and they love it. But with soccer, it's for whatever reason, people seem to struggle to find the beauty in the beautiful game outside of the attacking areas.
I think some has to do with like the amount of exciting plays there are. And like, I think for a lot of people who are new to soccer or don't watch it that often, an exciting play isn't that exciting unless it ends in a score or a goal. And so like there are a lot of really cool things that you can do in like basketball and football. Like you can hit the shit out of some guy, or you can make a crazy catch that doesn't lead to a goal, is completely forgotten about, but that catch is on top 10, you know, like you rarely see like a guy nutmegging a guy get on top 10 unless it leads to a goal. You know what I'm saying? So I think it has a lot to do with that of like, there's a lot of just watching, and because there's TV timeouts too, it's a lot of just like watching and waiting for something to happen. And then when it does happen, so celebratory and extravagant, and, you know, it's over climactic almost, to the point where it makes all the other things kind of feel small and insignificant to a newcomer, I would say. Yeah, goals are fun.
They are.
That's true. One thing I'll kind of end it on this is the I heard recently it was actually Mark Zumoff, who used to be the Phillies play-by-play guy. He has a podcast. He actually just had Alejandro Bedoya on not too long ago. And he was breaking it down as to why an American like him got into soccer was because even though it's low scoring, there's tension in every single play because you're building up to a goal. If you can build up to a goal, then there's that release and you get that joy from it. But the game is always on that edge of a knife and you never really know which way it's going to go. And it's kind of the tactics in between that of how the coaches have the players set it up, but then the players have to execute. Whereas in American sports, it's very much like a coach can call timeout and run a play. That doesn't really happen in soccer that much unless there's set plays. But we'll end it there. That was a good little segment on new soccer fans and offsides and if there will be more goals and things like that. It was a good time. So thanks, Desert Fox, for giving that comment in there. But all right, guys, it's time to move on to previewing the upcoming match for this weekend: Union versus Real Salt Lake. Philly coming back home after a bye week, taking on a Salt Lake team who just demolished Chicago last week in Chicago. I think it was in Chicago. I'd have to double check again. But yeah, they're looking like a pretty good team in form themselves out west. So real quick, I'll throw it over to Jimmy because I know he said he's been looking at a few things for Salt Lake. So Jimmy, what's your first kind of takeaways for Real Salt Lake here?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing I guess to point out right now is that Salt Lake, I believe, is they have not lost in their previous 5 games, I believe.
Yeah.
They're playing pretty well, and most of it is coming through 5 games. Yep, they have 3 wins and 2 draws across those 5 games. They've beaten Chicago 4-0. They had a 0-0 draw against Columbus, which is a pretty good result. A 1-1 draw against Minnesota on the road, which Minnesota, a team that lost to Union, but other than that has looked really, really good this season. So that also is a pretty good result for RSL. And then they had a 3-1 win at home against St. Louis and a 2-1 win on the road against Vancouver. A couple pretty solid results for a team out west that's playing in a conference that's kind of all over the place right now. LAFC just down in 7th place. Sporting Kansas City and St. Louis down in 10th and 11th. Seattle down in 12th. So there are opportunities for other teams in the West to kind of climb the ladder and take over, and RSL is doing that right now. And a lot of that has to do with Chicho Arango up top, almost all of it, to be completely honest. Let me see here. Let me just pull up stats. So RSL through their just getting this right. So they have 15 goals for and 8 goals against. And of those 15 goals, Christian Arango has 8 of them in his 9 games. So he is scoring most of the goals. The second most goal scorer on the team is Carlos Gomez, who has 3. But 2 of those goals came in that snow game against LAFC in the 2nd or 3rd week of the season. So besides that, every other goal scorer on the team only has 1 goal. And Arango is really kind of running away with things offensively. That being said, if you look at things from a defensive point of view, I think that there's an opportunity for Union to get at RSL. They do have 2 clean sheets this season, but other than that, they do typically give up a goal or 2. But that does bring up another good point, and I'll pass it on to some other people to kind of bring up their thoughts on it. But another big name coming to Subaru Park on Saturday night is former Union goalkeeper Zach McMath, who hopefully will be between the posts for RSL on Saturday in a nice little homecoming match for the former Union keeper. And maybe some other guys have some thoughts on that and kind of some prior U.S. Open Cup games and stuff like that. But I think if just from a general preview perspective, just looking at RSL, they're very, very reliant on Chicho Arango and getting goals up top, which if you kind of look at the opponents Union have gone against so far this season, they haven't really come up against a true really dangerous number 9. There have been a couple that are really high profile, but are kind of newer guys in the league and haven't found their footing. Let's look here. Chicago Fire, obviously Hugo Kuipers. It was like one of his first, if not his first game with a Chicago Fire. Sporting Kansas City doesn't really have, Willie Agata, but no one too strong up top. Austin doesn't really have anyone. Jonathan Rodriguez in Portland, it was his first game with the club. And then you've got Minnesota, Nashville, and then Atlanta. Giacomakis didn't play or didn't start the league. So this is really kind of the first game where Union are going up against a true number 9, someone that's really super lethal. And talking about number 9s, Cucho Hernandez just scored for Columbus, Hockey Champions Cup, as I was blurred. So, there are a lot of good number 9s in this league, and one of them's coming to Subaru Park on Saturday. And I guess I'll pass it along to you guys to kind of talk about how you think Union are going to handle coming up against such probably one of the Golden Boot leaders so far this season.
Yeah, I'll kind of go there first. I mean, it's going to be a big test for whoever is in the back line there, especially the center backs. We've seen now that Jim Curtin wants to rotate the center backs. So whether it's Glesnes and Elliott, Glesnes Lowe, Elliott and Lowe, we've seen all of those tandems so far this season. It's going to be their biggest test so far, and they've had an extra week to kind of prepare for it. I don't know if you guys saw, but it looked like a lot of Union players actually took the week off yesterday and traveled and went a lot of places. You saw a lot on Instagram stories. So that's kind of nice to kind of get a good recharge there. And now they're back this week training, getting ready to face their biggest test in Orongo. It'll be interesting to see how they stack up. Eric, I'll throw it over to you. Do you think who do you think Jim Curtin kind of goes with between with the center backs there?
Right now, it feels like he kind of trusts the pairing of Glesnes and Lowe a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm expecting. But as usual with these center backs, none of the pairings would surprise me. It's definitely a different kind of test than they faced against Atlanta with Thiago Almada. Mm-hmm. Preparing, they've done decently well the past few games playing against more of like the deeper lying danger man. So now it will be a very different test going up against the number 9. But they have had that extra week. Obviously, they were traveling some, so who knows how much training they actually got in. Yeah. But theoretically, that extra week to prepare, even if it's just for the coaching staff to prepare, will be to their benefit. Plus, with the home crowd behind them, I think they'll be excited to finally be playing back at home. I think they'll be fired up. And I think the defense, despite giving up some goals in the past few games, has definitely solidified more compared to the beginning of the season. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Yeah. I still feel like they'll snag one, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Fair enough. Paul, I'll throw this over to you. We haven't really talked about this player yet, but Real Salt Lake has a new number 10 who's been pulling the strings for them, Matt Crooks from England. He was a Premier League player for a while. It seems like he's kind of been the guy to provide a lot of the support for Orongo.
Yes.
So just wanted to get your thoughts on him, and then how you think the matchup between Crooks and El Brujo is going to go, because we know El Brujo loves to get under people's skin there.
Like you said, Crooks, he's played in England, and there's no doubt that that's one of the top leagues in the world. So it's going to be a tough competition. We've seen players come over there and just play well. I mean, you see Cucho play, who came over from Watford, and he's shredding this league up. And then you link up a top midfielder with a striker like Orongo. It's going to be tough for the Union. Like you said, you really haven't seen, I guess, a striker like Orongo. Then you have a guy who's linking up. It's going to be tough for the Union defense, in my opinion. I think Chicho will get one, and then it'll be an assist from Crooks. If you want me to be honest, which, I mean, I hate to say that because I want to see a clean sheet at Subaru Park, but it's two top talents. But Brujo, you know the physicality they have in England, and we know the physicality of El Brujo. So I'm excited to see it. For those betting odds, I would definitely put a yellow in El Brujo's betting odds for El Brujo, yellow for El Brujo. But I'm very curious to see how that's going to line up.
Just
Yeah.
kind of
Oh yeah, bad.
just kind of looking at some other statistics for RSL, looking at kind of like passing stats and how they kind of move the ball. Arango does actually lead the team in key passes as well. So not only does he lead the team, but he's in the upper 93rd percentile amongst all forwards in the league at progressive passes. So it shows that they work their way up the field through him. They get the ball to him. He holds it up. And someone else that is very instrumental in moving the ball for them is their, right back, Andrew Brody, who's playing same side as Kai Wagner. So that's going to be kind of duel as well, with two outside backs that kind of get up the field, put a lot of crosses into the box, a lot of progressive passes, a lot of key passes, passes in the final third and such. So it'll be interesting to see if either one of those can kind of take advantage of the space left behind by the other, and if they can kind of take advantage of that. But then at the same time, Union have looked so good going up the other side of the field on the right with Quinn Sullivan and Olivier Mbizo or Nate Harriel, whoever's playing up there at whatever given time, that it may not be as much of an offensive thing on the left side of the field, and we may need to ask Kai to kind of defend a little bit more. But I thought that was interesting to note that RSL has an outside back that, like Union, is involved in a lot of their attacking play.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot of interesting individual matchups that we're kind of seeing now as we're kind of previewing the match. One player we haven't really mentioned for the Union, and we don't know if he's available or not yet because Jim Curtin hasn't had his press conference, is Andre Blake. So just wanted to kind of pick your guys' brain. Like, does it, with Semla playing as well as he's been playing, do you think it really matters that much if Blake needs to take some more time off here? And I'll throw this over to Paul first to just get your thoughts on it.
Honestly, what I would do is I would give Semla the start. We know how well he's playing. He's playing out of his league. Not out of his league, I don't want to say, but he's been playing phenomenal for a player who we signed to be a backup to the best goalie in the league. But I would give Blake the extra rest he needs so he doesn't come back. I know Blake's a competitor, and he's gonna, if he can play, he's gonna want to be out there. But I think Curtin should be like, listen, you see what we can do with Semla. You see that this team can play well with him. Get the extra rest. Get 100% instead of 85, 90%, because we're gonna need you possibly later in the season for a run. And just get out there. We'll be fine. We'll get the 3 points at home for you.
Yeah. Eric, do you have similar thoughts to that one?
Yeah, I agree. He's been struggling all season with these kind of little injuries. So getting him some actual rest and getting him back up to 100%, like Paul was saying, I think is vital going forward. It does make me a little sad. The idea of seeing Andre Blake on one side and Zach McMath on the other is fun. But I think unless he's somehow 100%, which I don't see how he could be, I think you rest him.
Yeah. That is sad to think about. Oh, I didn't even consider that, of how it would be McMath versus Blake. Yeah, I mean, McMath was a staple here for those early Union seasons when the team wasn't that great, but McMath could kind of, stand on his head and get some good saves. Eric, I think it was you who was saying before the show, you had a funny story about the draft when McMath was drafted. Do you want to share that one?
Oh, yeah. I guess.
Doesn't really have to do with the game, but it's still funny. So I figured,
Yeah. It's basically just one of my housemates, like many of us, is not a big fan of Alexi Lawless. And he was there at the draft. The draft was in Philly. So we were there, and my housemate had a water bottle. Plastic one, not like one of the big hefty metal ones or anything. And he still to this day talks about how he regrets not like that one Tim has. But he kind of regrets not taking the chance to chuck it at Alexi Lawless. I think a lot of us would argue that he may deserve that.
He does deserve that. But I thought that was funny. The same time that Zach McMath got drafted by the Union, your housemate almost got arrested for throwing a water bottle at Alexi Lawless. So
he said the only reason he didn't was because then we'd get kicked out and I would be mad. So
yeah, I mean that's fair. But yeah, we'll see if full circle. We'll see if Zach McMath does get to play this weekend for RSL. I noticed he didn't play last week. I haven't seen if that was because of injury or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have heard anything. But it's interesting if he doesn't. He actually came to Subaru Park once before as the backup to Tim Howard when he was with Colorado. So he missed that opportunity as well. So I hope he does get kind of his chance to play at Subaru Park again. I don't know how many Union fans, except for the ones who were there a decade ago, will really remember how important he was to the club when the team wasn't that good. But it would be cool to see him on the field again. This coming weekend.
Does RSL's keeper wear orange? That's
a great question, and I kind of hope so because the images of Zach McMath wearing highlighter orange stained in my mind.
I still haven't come up with a good rhyme for orange.
No, I haven't. That's a funny one. All right, real quick before we kind of get things wrapped up here, do we want to go through our lineup projections? I know it'll probably all be the same, but I think we're all kind of in agreement. We're thinking if Andre Blake isn't 100%, or if he isn't telling Jim Curtin that he's going to play, that we're going to see Semla in goal. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. And I think obviously we'll get news from Jim this week on Andre, but I think it's going to be one of those updates where it's I don't know. I just have this weird feeling that the update that we get is not a super, super positive one. I don't necessarily know that it's going to be like he's out for the season or anything. But just with the amount that this guy has been trying to battle through the injury, and even at times where he hasn't come out of the game, you've seen him kind of laboring. I wonder if the Union have come to a point where they've decided to shut it down for a little bit. And whether that means surgery or whatever. I'm fearful for that, but I am preparing for that as well. I don't think the Union have posted any training pictures yet so far this week. No. Not that I've seen at all. I've been kind of trying to wait to see if we get any Andre Blake thumbs up photos. But I don't know. I think this week it is probably pretty likely that we see Oliver Semla. But I also would not be surprised to see Andre sidelined for a number of weeks after we get this update this week.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear the update because we know that in the back of Andre's mind as well is the Copa America because Jamaica is going to be there and he's their captain and he's going to want to play in that tournament this summer as well. So yeah, we'll see what kind of update we get this week from Jim Curtin on the goalkeeper situation. But hey, at least we have Ollie Semla now, who's been able to step up and has been shown to be a great MLS keeper, not just a great MLS backup. So that's really, really good to see. In terms of the back line, and as we kind of go through it, we know Kai Wagner is going to be on the left. We can kind of throw any of the three center backs in there. It doesn't really matter at this point. I don't think it's really much of a debate or anything like that. And then the only other thing would be right back. And I think it's Nate Harriel's job right now. And Bizo is kind of a late game sub to kind of change the pace up a little bit. Do you guys agree?
I do.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if I had to give a prediction for the center backs, I think we'll probably see. I don't know if Elliott or Lowe will be, or Elliott or Glesnes will be the other one, but I think Damian Lowe's physicality, is him going up against Arango seems like the reason why you go out and get a guy like Damian Lowe. So I would expect to see Damian in the lineup on Saturday, and I think Glesnes fares a little bit better next to him in that matchup. But I don't know what Jim Curtin's thinking, but that's how I feel is Blesnes and Lowe in the center back pairing.
Yeah, I like that. I think that would work really well against a player like Arango and Crooks as well there. So we'll see how that goes. For the midfield, we know El Brujo is going to be at the 6. And then it leaves us. I think the midfield is going to actually stay intact from the last game of McGlynn on the left, Sullivan on the right, or not the last game, but just kind of what the overall lineup is. McGlynn on the left, Sullivan on the right, Gazdag at the 10. Do you think Jim Curtin kind of inserts anyone else into that spot, or do you think that they're going to move Sullivan back down to the midfield?
Nah, I don't think mess with it. I think they're creating a lot. Pretty well, and the only time we've really seen Quinn not play on that right side is when he's played up top for a striker that's come off. So I think if you've got both strikers available, just keep that midfield together. I don't think this is a game that calls for Ali Bedoya starting. I think Jack McGlynn's fine on that left side, Quinn on the right. One thing I'm hopeful for is to see. I don't know if we'll see him on the bench, but I think this week we might get close to seeing Leon Flock back in training with the team, and that's an exciting thing. I've always had a really Leon as a player. I always enjoy guys that aren't on the top of the scoring charts or anything like that, and I really like guys that put in a lot of effort, and you can tell that Jim Curtin likes Leon Flock and fancies him on the depth chart. And anybody that Jim Curtin likes is an important player for me, because he can make players reach above their ceiling. So I'm excited to see Leon come back to the team this week, even if it's not actually being on the team sheet in any way.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think he's a very important player for the club's aspirations this season. And we'll see whenever he's able to get back, it'll be a welcome sight for sure, especially for the defensive shape of the midfield, because we know when McGlynn and Sullivan are on those shuttler positions, they love to get forward and they can hustle back to a point, but they leave themselves a little bit exposed on the defensive side. Which happens, but yeah. And then Eric, I'll throw it over to you for the strikers. We think we get Ua and Carranza up top again together.
Yeah, as long as it was good to go from the start. He was having some of those injury issues, so that's maybe a question mark. But with the bye week, I would assume he's healthy at this point and good to go in the starting lineup. So yeah, I think we see this.
And probably itching to keep his form going in Atlanta and scoring and almost bagging the winner as well. I would bet he's someone on the team that's probably as ready to play more than anybody on the team coming into Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, guys, I think we're just about at that time. So it's time for our On the Volley takes and predictions for this upcoming match. And Paul, I'll throw it over to you. How are you feeling this game against RSL is going to go down?
I'm feeling very confident. I know RSL is a good team with Arango and everything, but this Union team is different at home. Obviously, they're undefeated so far this season. I did predict a draw in our preseason or our predictions from earlier in the season, but I don't think I took into consideration the form that the Union would be in. So I'm gonna say they're gonna continue the streak and they're gonna get a nice. I'm gonna go 3-0 win.
Ooh, there's that complete performance that you want from him. That would be great. Who do you think scores that?
I think Ura will continue his form. I guess this will be my bold take. I'm gonna pick an Ura brace.
Okay.
He's gonna get it back, that brace that he deserved from Atlanta that he was robbed of, but I'm not gonna get into that too much. And then I'm gonna think a nice Carranza goal again.
Nice. All right, so striker goals. I'm here for it. I would love to see that. Eric, I'll throw it over to you. You're on the Volley taking predictions for this match.
I'm thinking 2-1 Union. I think to change things up a little bit, we get the first goal.
Ooh.
I think they'll come out fired up, being at home and everything, and get that first goal. I'm going to say UA with that goal. Then I think RSL ties it up at some point, maybe like a goal late in the half, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And then similar to the first half, Union come out fired up in the second half and get that winner.
Yeah.
And I'll say Sullivan for the winner.
Ooh.
I'd love to see that. I love a Quinn Sullivan goal. Kid deserves it. And then Jimmy, throw it over to you on the volley take here. Predictions.
62 degrees, partly sunny.
Love it.
Good, pretty good Saturday to get 3 points. I'm going 3-2. I think it's going to be kind of a little bit of a back and forth game. Not sure. I don't know how that's going to play out, if Union score first, if RSL score first, but I do think there's going to be goals in this one. I'm going to say Michael Ua, Julian Carranza, and Daniel Gazdag scores to tie Sebastian Letou as Union's all-time leading goal scorer across all competitions. That is my on the volley take.
You kind of stole mine. It's a little bit different. I was gonna go Gazdag to get to actually get the record. I was gonna say 2-0 Union win. He scores both goals, both penalties, because why not?
Why not?
And yeah, so that would be my on the volley take as well. Well, guys, that'll do it for another episode of Doop on the Volley. Thanks so much for the hundreds of you who've come out and made this show really what it is. It's a great time to come and hang out with everyone, whether it's a pregame podcast or like this in the middle of the week. We love hanging out with you guys, and keep on, following, keep on commenting. We'll put up some good comments and have some good discussions like we did today. And yeah, we'll see you guys pretty soon. I know that the next Union game is next Tuesday, so us guys have to kind of figure out if we're going to do a podcast either on Sunday or Monday, maybe, or we'll figure it out. But you'll see us pretty soon, and see you guys next time. Have a good night, everybody.